And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Daily Sigh. It's another beautiful day of fun and adventure. Pardon me while I'm making sure that I get everything set up from a technical perspective. Today's going to be a fun one, y'all. We got one of my favorite human beings in the whole wide world joining, and he's going to give up all the goods on, well, to be honest with you, all my dirty laundry. At least that's the hope. Let's see, letting everybody into the Zoom room. By the way, if you want to join us in the private Zoom room, it's absolutely free to do. You just need to go to dailysigh.ai and sign up for my free forever community. And if you've got note takers in here, I'm kicking them up as much as I love y'all. Okay, let's read some news. Uh, Here we go. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd, and this is your daily sigh of relief. If you're an entrepreneur trying to keep up with what actually matters, this is for you. I go live every single day at 6 p.m. Eastern, and to the very best of my ability, I give you everything that I think matters in the entrepreneurial world across business, AI, markets, platforms, and policies. If you want the Daily Sigh delivered directly to your inbox, go to dailysigh.ai. We'll deliver it daily or weekly. If you want to join the free forever community and hang out with us on Zoom, just go to dailysigh.ai, click the join live button. And now, with no further preamble, um, the news for today. Insider Monkey reports that AI disruption fears hit Salesforce sales pipeline. Salesforce is seeing an unexpected slowdown because clients fear the traditional CRM model is becoming obsolete. They would be correct. That actually makes me feel good. I've always hated Salesforce with everything inside of me. I cannot wait to see them replaced by vibe coding. So that's good news. Reuters. Kraken becomes first crypto firm to win Fed master account. What? Kraken's gone with the evil empire. Kraken's Wyoming banking arm now has direct access to the Federal Reserve's payment rails, allowing it to move money faster and more cheaply by cutting out bank intermediaries. I did not see Kraken and the Fed getting in bed with each other. Uh, this was not on my bingo card. I actually kind of always thought they were going to be, you know, the rebels. I think Kraken is the oldest of all the crypto exchanges. So I guess it makes sense that they're the first. This is a landmark victory for the digital asset industry under a crypto-friendly administration, giving the sector unprecedented access to the mainstream financial system. Why would connection to the Fed be a victory? It's like we found a pipeline to hell and we've opened it. Morning Brew reports, who is John Ternus, the new CEO of Apple? Apple is transitioning from Tim Cook supply chain focus to a hardware engineer tasked with integrating AI directly into devices. They're basically just using Google. So I feel like that's an API call and his job is done. This signals a shift towards edge AI, where intelligence runs locally on your phone rather than a distant cloud. From Reddit, solo founder cut SaaS stack 83% using AI. Who cares? HubSpot, B2B buyers shift to AI for vendor discovery. Hashtag shocker. Our backup story bank reports. Pulse 2.0, Creo AI raises 10 million for autonomous workflows. Um, from internal notes, OpenAI ChatGPT Images 2.0 rollout. New version offers dramatically better text rendering for visual reasoning. Be interested on the council if anybody's played with this, and if so, what you think. Um, Interesting to see the AI battles shift back and forth between um, reasoning, coding, and imagery. It feels like all of a sudden we're back into media. Um, Sorry, reading through some messages here. Also from internal notes, Google launches Gemini Enterprise Agent Platform, a new tool for orchestrating large-scale AI agents to automate repetitive operations. Cool. Some from Morning Brew, Spirit Airlines seeks federal bailout. The bankrupt airline is asking the government for a cash infusion in exchange for equity. All right. If you've ever flown Spirit, you know that they deserve to fail and die. Morning Brew reports CarX to raise condom prices. CarX? CarX? CarX to raise condom prices 20 to 30%. Supply chain shocks from the Iran war hitting petrochemical derived products. Wow. I never thought about this. The petrol shortage would hurt condoms. there's got to be anthropological implications here. There's going to be a population boom. That's so funny. All right, let's open it up, admit the council, and allow for some unmutes. Unmute, start video. If you're watching this live, you can always join us here on Zoom. Just go to dailysigh.ai. Really excited to welcome my business mentor of 22 years to the call. He was texting me as I was reporting. Zoom wasn't working for him, so I just sent it to his email. I think he is inbound. In the meantime, we have the usual suspects: Jason, Jacob, Brandon. Josh is back. Thanks, Josh. Deborah, always a pleasure. Elliot, Jason Croft, Clinton Martin, Dylan Fetch, the man, the myth, the legend. There's Wayne, Steve, Lee, Neil, Stacy, Larkin, Nico. Sherry's newbie. She was just on Chris Gray's call, though, Sherry. I'm so glad you're here. Have you been to this side before? I don't think you have. And then I see Randy. Randy Gage is a new face. Glad you're here, Randy. And last but absolutely not least is Greg Smith. Greg, thanks for being here, man. By way of introduction, Greg is an investment banker. He's built three, I don't know what to call it, ultra high net worth familial back offices. He's bought and sold 35 to 40 banks, bought and sold Sun Country Airlines twice. So we'll ask him about Spirit Airlines. Created one of the largest fleet of automobiles in the United States. Bought or sold, or maybe bought and sold a plastics company where the buyer bid against themselves 3 times. Uh, and has done more stuff than I'll ever be able to describe. He's also been my business. His greatest accomplishment is making me successful because I was the least likely of I think any of those things to happen. I met Greg when I was 19 years old, and he adopted me in an entrepreneurial sense, and I followed him around like a sad puppy. And we've traveled together. I've hung out with his grandkids now, who are all extraordinary, the four aces. Uh, and he's one of my best friends, and he's my business mentor. And he puts up with stuff like this for me all the time because I like to drag him out and show him off to people. So here he is. Greg, thanks for being here.
A pleasure. The four aces are Ava, Cooper, Everett, and Sebastian, just for reference.
And Ava is she's an equestrian. She just started doing, or not started, but she's doing jumping, right? She's competing at a pretty high level. You see the
Yeah,
picture.
130 meters for a 14-year-old. Yeah,
Oh my golly.
pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, that really is. Well, I'm glad you're here, Greg. This is the council. This is the group of people that I con into hanging out with me daily. They all show up and give me all their best tips and tricks. And you've come up relatively often on calls, and so I thought, man, let's have Greg show up and maybe drop some of his wisdom. Council, I'd love to make this as collaborative as we want it to be. If you have questions for Greg as he's talking, feel free to drop in the chat. If you want to raise your hand using the Zoom feature, you can feel free to do that too. Greg, I'd love to kick us off, if you don't mind. You've had more and broader experience from an M&A perspective than anybody I know personally. I'd be curious as to your read on the current situation. Like everybody in my echo chamber keeps saying this is unprecedented. It's the craziest time to be alive. They've never seen anything like it. Uh, is that true? Like, have you seen, is
No.
there another time that's analogous to this?
Well, I suppose it depends on your perspective. I think I gave you a quick no. Um, I have lived through lots of economic cycles. So just for quick reference, I was born in 1950 and I'm 75 years old. And I'm still working every day. And I have partners that work with me on lots of different transactions. And I'll tell you what's even more shattering is to be in the M&A business or on the buy side of a transaction when interest rates move up to 21.75%,
Hmm.
i.e. 1981. And no one expected that to happen. And the family that I was representing at that juncture had just begun acquiring commercial banks across the country and became somewhat highly leveraged in doing so. But they were leveraging at 12 and 13 and 14%. It was almost like overnight we saw 21.75%, and people thought the world was going to come to an end. It didn't. We went through 1999 with computers, and everybody thought when the computers rolled over to the year 2000, our brains were going to blow up. but it didn't happen. And I think a lot of people, at least a lot of people I know in the market who pulled out, thought we were going to get into a war with Iran.
Mm,
But now we're in an indefinite ceasefire. And a lot of people thought AI was going to put a lot of workers out of jobs, and it will for sure, but it's also creating a lot of new jobs and incredible scientific invention and discovery with AI. So I think, for me, I wake up every morning with the work I'm doing, excited to see what's going to happen, what we can control and what we cannot control. And from that, figure out how to manage risk
mm,
because we're all invested in something financially or otherwise. And I think we live in a world where risk is changing. Risk is what we have to look at in terms of how safe do we want to feel? What are our opportunities in the future? Where do we want to invest our time and our resources? And how do we find that work-play balance in our lives?
mm.
And I think that's what's changing. How we look and evaluate at risk is evolving.
Can you speak to that a little? How are you doing it with, the people that you work with, the businesses you're buying and selling? Is there something actionable, like a new frame, a new template, a new SOP? How does it work now with the reframing
Well,
risk?
I think we adapt, but in terms of the work that I do with my associates, it's still basically back to the fundamentals, whether on the buy side of a transaction or the sell side of the transaction. Frankly, it still gets back to who are we dealing with? Are these people trustworthy? Would we do business with them on a handshake? Obviously, we're not going to. We have to paper it up. Um, but are we working with people that are mutually aligned with where we want to go, where our client wants to go? And we can't always be sure of that,
Mm.
but we have to do the best due diligence we can. We have to rely on representations and we have to use common sense. And I don't know if AI will replace common sense, but I know a lot of people that don't have it, and I hope they can find it. And I've lived too many years at this juncture to teach people about common sense. I guess if I find that they don't have it, we walk.
Are you seeing any big opportunities that other people aren't seeing? Like, there are any industries and sectors that you think deserve extra special attention?
Well, I would say that what we're seeing right now for the first time since people started talking about tokens and technology and AI is the Federal Reserve. Kasim, I think I sent you an email on this earlier today, starting to really warm up to a company called Kraken. So when we
Mhm.
start talking about tokenization, I think we're going to see new industries evolve. And and that will certainly evolve with the favor of the Fed, because the Fed and this administration and the previous administrations have been somewhat afraid of what this might mean to the economy and financial structures. And I think they're starting to get acclimated and they're building rules around this now that we've never seen before. And so is the SEC in terms of the use of technology and in monetizing assets. So I think there's an opportunity. And along with that, we're starting to see land that has access to electric and power and water in the middle of no place with just rattlesnakes and bunnies jumping around, selling for over 200 and $300,000 an acre to the hyperscalers.
Mm,
So land investments, which many times were geared either to mixed use development or oil and gas, natural resources, are now becoming extremely valuable if you have permit and entitlement and enough land and access to water and power. And I think power generation is going to be another big industry because we're just running out of it. And we're going back to coal and uh, other not friendly elements to carbon, and we'll have to find some new solutions for power. So people that are in the power game right now are looking at all kinds of alternatives. And I think we'll see a lot of foreign investment in the US as it relates to power. We're seeing it right now.
mm. What are you working on? Anything exciting that you're allowed to share with us?
Um, well, yeah, if you don't mind, I'm jumping around, but I don't want it to sound like a pitch session because
Let's
it's
pitch.
not.
That's we're all good marketers here. Why not?
Well, I have to go through my compliance department and a bunch of attorneys if I'm going to pitch something. So I'm not pitching anything. But a couple things that are kind of exciting. You may have heard of lending to athletes.
Hmm.
And there's a few companies that have gotten into tremendous trouble doing this, in part because they've been taking a financial interest in the athletes' future earnings, which is really aggressive in terms of social responsibility, dealing with young 19 and 21 and 23-year-old athletes that are starting to make 5 million, 6 million, $8 million a year. And there are lenders that are very predatory and providing cash resources to these players and then taking equity interest in their future earnings, and not just for next year, but forever. We have a client that knows this industry very, very well. They've been dealing with three different high net worth investors in Manhattan that have been selling real estate, creating liquidity, and bringing it to loans to athletes. So our client has done about 60 million in loans to athletes. We formed a fund. We're raising capital for the fund. The fund will make these loans to athletes on the guaranteed portion of their contract, up to 20% of the guaranteed portion of the contract. The loans are 15%. It's 4 points, but these are not loans that a bank would make. And the fund takes a UCC1 lien against the contract. It receives from the player a non-revocable assignment of his payroll deposits. So we're getting the actual payment from the New York Giants or the Green Bay Packers or the Minnesota Twins, sending the paycheck to our client. The client applies the payment to the loan, and the loans will mature at 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, very short, and the money turns over. So this money turns over 2 to 3 times a year. The fund earns about 30%. It's an 80-20 deal for the investors. Investors should make about 22% on their money, all secured by the guaranteed portion of contracts with professional athletes. Sounds interesting?
It does. So
Yeah.
Neil on the council said, I had no idea pro athletes were taking payday loans, which is only half a joke. Like, why do these guys and gals need this money? You'd assume that they'd just be cash flush.
Um, I'll give you one example because I got hold of his bat at the Louisville baseball bat factory and pulled his bat out of the cupboard and took 15 pitches with it. And I connected with 10 of the 15 pitches. He's a left fielder for a Major League Baseball team. He makes $17 million a year. He's in the seventh of an 8 year contract, but he's only paid during season. Well, you think he put a lot of money away at 17 million pre-tax, but he needed 3 million to invest in a multifamily project that his buddies were putting together, and he needed to access funds. I think he had about a week to do it. Otherwise, somebody else was stepping ahead of him in this particular real estate transaction. So he came to my client. We put together a $3.4 million loan. From the $3.4 million loan, there were 4 points, and there was, I think, $110,000 for the insurance policy and closing costs. So he walked away with the money that he needed. You might ask about insurance. What's that all about? Well, my client has an arrangement with Lloyd's of London, where Lloyd's of London will insure for the death, disability, or disgrace of the player. So if the player has a bad record, bad references, has had trouble with the law, he's not going to get the loan at all because we do extensive, deep due diligence. But if he's got a clean record and for some reason uses drugs or gets drunk and drives a car off the road and kills somebody, that's disgrace, and that's covered by Lloyd's of London.
Hmm.
So all of our loans are insured. We gross up the loan for the points and the insurance and the closing costs, and the net amount is what the player walks away with. And he can do it in 5 days with our client. For a bank, it might be 6 months before he ever gets that loan or never.
Wow.
Yeah.
Greg, this is one of the things I love about you is every time you tell me about a new deal you're working on, I feel like you know the inner workings of that business better than the people in the business. I've heard you talk about ADA compliance and plasticizers and cancer research drugs and that whatever that back scratcher was that we invested in. Like you really dive deep to a degree that feels almost unnecessary. Is that unfair to say? Like it's like an obsession that you have, and whatever it is that you're doing, you learn it so well.
Well, I would say two things. One, because I'm a registered rep with a FINRA member broker-dealer representing clients in the issue of capital or equities, it's my job to know everything that I can possibly know so that I can make an honest and truthful disclosure to the investor as to the risk.
Mm,
Because it's great to talk about the opportunity and what we expect will happen, but I have to be able to talk about the risk. So we do that with disclosure statements in offering documents, private placement memorandums, but we actually have to kind of talk through the whole process. And I typically will talk through that process before I put the client on the phone or into a Zoom call, because I need to vet with the investor that one, it's an appropriate investment for the investor. If I've gone way over their head or the dollars are too much or it's way too risky based on their financial profile, I do not want to show them to my client because my client, he's there to close deals and get the money to work and run the business. I have to screen all that. So I have to make sure that it's an appropriate investment for the investor. And a lot of that discussion is about risk. Secondly, uh, Costin, because much of my career has been managing the financial affairs of three different unrelated, ultra high net worth families and representing them in acquisitions where I was on the buy side for the family investing into the particular business. There too, I had to know everything about the business, upside down and inside out, before I could commit the financial resources, which would oftentimes be substantial, for these families for whom I was representing. So, it's just how I operate, and maybe it's because I'm a recovering CPA, maybe it's because I'm a recovering commercial banker, or maybe it's because somebody told me long, long, long time ago, inspect what you expect. And so that's worked very, very well for me.
well, and it's a beautiful segue because hold on.
Hey, we aren't pitching anything.
No.
Get back in your chair.
So, my brother Greg wrote a book. Let me co-spotlight myself here.
Wow.
And this is No Locked Doors by Gregory Smith, available on Amazon. It was an Amazon bestseller. Can you talk to us a little bit about, because that's one you have your rules of life in a lot of ways here, and one of them is inspect what you expect. But
Yeah.
it's such a beautifully written book because every chapter starts with a story, and the stories are always like, nail biters, and then you segue from the story to the lesson. And each of the lessons is I have found them to be really profound. So what you refer to them as keys, master the keys to transform problems into possibilities. So if you don't mind, share a little bit about the book and maybe a little bit more on some of the keys.
Sure. Well, it's been a while since I've looked at the book, but I would say that the motivation, I think, for the book was to leave something behind. And over the years, with my relationship with Cosm, and you'll see this in the foreword of the book if you happen to buy it. Um, Cosm really challenged me to put this book together. I probably wouldn't have done it had he not gifted me the resources and really set the stage with a ghostwriter and other resources to be able to get the book put together and published. And it was a real honor and a pleasure to do it. Um, I have found that um, building organizations and hiring and recruiting really requires me to set my ego aside and hire smart and hire people that are um, going to be able to exceed what I can do in countless number of ways. But they might be green when I bring them into an organization and help them to evolve. And so the book really isn't telling anybody how to do anything.
Hmm.
And Kazem knows this because I've never really told Kazem how to do anything, but I've helped people think through how to do things, how to accomplish their way through challenges. And there's 15 chapters in the book that go through some pretty extraordinary challenges that I've had to face, mostly in business, a little bit in my personal life, and how to deal with those challenges and find the keys from within myself or perhaps other resources I can call upon to solve my problems, unlock the doors, and you kind of become a locksmith, if you will, or a fixer or a problem solver. And I think that's why I was successful with three different families because they each had different kinds and types of challenges. We were in regulated industries almost all the time. So I had to spend a lot of time where they wouldn't show up with the Treasury Department or the Comptroller of the Currency or the Department of Justice or the SEC or the Department of Transportation. And, you know, they say life gets in the way or shit happens. And that is just part of life. You have to figure out how to deal with those challenges and not let them bury you. We bought an airline, highly leveraged. And after the transaction, we retained the CEO and founder, who became a 10% shareholder with the family I represented. And that was great. And I took off for Albuquerque to work on a bank acquisition. And the CEO was now reporting into the board of directors, which included myself and the family. And I got a phone call 60 days later that he was dead.
Hmm.
And, and I'm in Albuquerque in the middle of a bank acquisition. You get a call like that. And I had to give everybody comfort that we would solve it. We would find the best people, the best resources to run this airline and achieve our goals and objectives. And the family said, look, there's a lot of airline people out there, but we need you to transition and figure out what we're going to do with this airline. I didn't know anything. I mean, I don't even know how a plane flies. And I don't know how to order a ticket for a plane, but I had to go figure out how did this thing work. And thankfully, I was able to find some good people and some good resources to help me. And we took a company from uh, 50 million a year to 250 million a year and a $24 million EBITDA and built a very successful company that the union tried to break into 4 or 5 times over those 9 years. They got voted out every single time because of the benefit program I put in place for the employees. And we stuck to our knitting and we flew charter, never scheduled. So we stayed out of the way of uh, Northwest Airlines, which became Delta. And we owned only one asset. And I might share this with those of you that are in businesses that require capital assets. We owned an engine, and that was it. And I built the fleet from 2 planes to 18 planes. And I got people like Sanwa Bank to do 100% financing of these planes and show them the tax advantages of their ownership, not ours. And we would lease these planes. So if anything ever happened badly with the business or the economy, we could just take the keys and give them back to the people that own the assets. What were the assets? Planes, parts, jetways, field equipment, whole kitchen catering operation. We owned one spare engine. That was it. The whole entire operation was leased. And it was an incredible company. It's had 9 owners. And I think I will write a book eventually about the history of Sun Country Airlines. And I think it'll be an exciting book for anybody about the business because it did go into bankruptcy after I sold it. And that's a chapter. And another guy that I sold it to later ended up being indicted for securities fraud, and he got 2 life sentences in prison
Hmm.
for dealing with the mob, and had nothing to do with the airlines. But the airline went into the U.S. Treasury to help satisfy his uh, uh, financial obligations. And when it came out, it was acquired by another high net worth family and eventually went public and today is part of Allegiant Airlines. So Sun Country Airlines is now part of Allegiant, but it's had 9 different owners. I ran it twice, 9 years for one group and 3 or 4 years for another group. We bought it out of bankruptcy for $1.6 million,
Wow.
recapitalized it with 15, and I got everybody back 32 million in 25 months. Yeah, shit happens.
Yeah, not a bad payday. I have another very self-interested question, new topic, since we're bouncing around. Um, I'm not unique in that you've had a lot of mentees. I've seen you help a lot of people. As a matter of fact, it's felt a little bit like a template that you run. Like there's always two or three young men or women sort of nipping at your heels for advice, help, counsel, mentorship. It's one of the best and most important things that's ever happened to me professionally. I know you don't love when I bring that up, but I'm here to embarrass you. For anybody watching, I'd be curious, A, why you do that? Why, and I don't want to say waste the time, but spend the time because the time is significant. The amount of time you spend is, it feels like at least a part-time job, sometimes full. A, and B, second half of that question is if there's somebody watching this now, how do they find the right mentor? Like, what is it that attracts you to somebody? How do you, sniff out who you take and who you don't? So it's a two-parter. Feel free to do with it whatever you'd like.
Okay, and I hope anybody in our conference here today will open up their mic and join in the exchange here because the last thing I want to do is tell anybody what to do or how to do it. That's for you to figure out. And that's, I think, part of mentoring, Kasim, is for me to enable people to figure out how to solve problems. The more people I would bring into an organization that could solve problems left me time to figure out what are the next opportunities, how to be more creative, how to give thought and mindfulness to advantages and opportunities depending on the ever-changing economy and how to manage risk. So in some cases, it was uh, 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 selfish on my part to do it because a lot of these people would come into our organization and be very successful. But at the same time, for me, it was very gratifying because in, I think fair to say, every single instance where I did that, the people that I worked with have become extremely successful. In fact, not to go back to the book, but the last chapter in my book is about my business partner, Zachary.
Hmm.
And in the book, I change everybody's name except Qasim's and Zachary. And Qasim is in the foreword at the beginning of the book, and Zachary is the last chapter in the book. But that's a perfect example of somebody who just walked into my life when I was forming my own business called Banco Advisors, BANCO. And this kid just walked into my life. And his parents knew a former business partner of mine, and he had a full securities license, Series 7, 63, had all the licenses. And the firm he was working for at the time, only 6 months, kind of blew up.
Hmm.
It's kind of a sad story. But he didn't have any place to go. And he came over to my office and he had on a pair of slacks and a shirt, and we had a nice conversation. And it was kind of like meeting you, Qasim, for the first time. He didn't really know, you didn't really know, and I didn't really know.
Hmm.
Um, but I said after about a 45-minute conversation, I said, "Do you own a sport coat?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why don't you go home and put the sport coat on and meet me at this bank? And I'm going to introduce you as my business associate." And that afternoon, we went into the boardroom of a bank in Scottsdale, Arizona, that I had been working on trying to get an engagement to sell this bank. I was competing with some major firms. I'm just a little Banco Advisors guy. And I brought him along and I told him, I said, if you feel like you have something you want to say it because I trust you. I had come to just get a good feeling about this guy. And he made a couple comments and he caused people to kind of pause and think a little bit. And because many times some of the smartest people in the room are the youngest, least experienced people that have no inhibitions and they will just say something. And it might be the best idea ever. And we walked away with an engagement to sell a bank. And I think 6 months later, we sold it. And then he
Wow.
worked on several bank transactions with several high net worth people that engaged us to help them buy a bank or sell a bank. He was very successful working on a bank in Colorado with a high net worth investor we represented on the buy side. And to this day, I just try and get out of his way. I've been trying to get out of his way for 14 years. I've been waiting for him to fire me, but he hasn't fired me yet.
I love that a lot. Greg, thank you so much for sharing these stories with us. I'd like to, if you don't mind, open it up to the council. Uh, it's not often we get to peer into the mind of someone like Greg Smith. So I would ask you to put any imposter syndrome or shyness aside, and if you have a question, raise your hand. Because, like Greg said, Zach walked into the bank, didn't know a damn thing, but he piped up, and that got him whatever opportunity came after that. Sounded like 15 years.
Yeah.
So, for whatever that's worth, I see four hands up. I'm going to go in order that I see them. Jason, you're up, and Deborah, you're on deck.
So this is a good book. I actually got it, and Kasem, it was interesting what you said. You called Greg a thief. How dare you? You car thief, you. How dare you? Um, really, really good book. I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but there are some interesting insights in here. But I do want to read one section here that it's it's obvious sometimes, but we just need to hear to see it different. And when we get to talking about key innovations, innovation requires risk. It's a commitment to trial and error.
Hmm.
You won't always find the solution the first time around, but you have to remember that you do have what it takes to find your way through. Once you've identified the actual problem, sit with it. Think about the most obvious solutions and then let it sit for a while longer. See what bubbles up from inside of you. You likely have more ability in you to find an innovative solution than you give yourself credit for. You really shouldn't think about that. It's kind of heavy. Sometimes we just need to soak a bit and not be a victim, right?
Yeah. I think we are each individually the hardest people on ourselves.
Hmm.
I don't think anybody could be more critical of me than me. And I beat myself up way too many times when I didn't deserve it. So I'm just passing that on that you have to persevere. You cannot give up. It probably was a good idea. Maybe you just didn't have the right partner or the right resource. I formed a business in Scottsdale. I had two guys that knew everybody, and I think Cosm knows who they
Yeah, I know both of them.
are. And there's an interesting story there, but they knew everybody. And I thought we would have the greatest company in the world. I formed a company called Cambio Capital Advisors. Cambio is a Hispanic or Mexican term. It means exchange. It can mean other things too. But if I give you a chicken and you give me back $5, we've done Cambio. Cambio, excuse me. Yeah, they would refer people to me, but that was it. They were in the bars and the restaurants and all playing golf, and I did all the work. And then they wanted all the profit
Hmm.
because their introductions were so priceless. I decided I could make my own introductions and I left the partnership. That's when I formed my own business. So I was pretty down about it, but my opportunity was to do something myself. So Jason, I appreciate your harvesting that comment. And I do feel that we do have to dig down deep and find our roots. We're born with roots. We have good roots. You have good families. You have good friends. You have good nurturing environment around you. But you also have wings. And so that's where the risk comes into it, is getting those wings spread out based on trust, maybe based on your faith, and and enjoy going forward and identify the risks that you feel you can manage and then manage it. I probably should have formed my own business long ago, but I had so many opportunities managing other people's money that I never really got around to managing my own.
Mm.
And I think I did a pretty good job for these three high net worth families because, well, the evidence is in their estates and their children's estates and now their grandchildren's estates. So I should have done it sooner. As I look back, there aren't many things I would do different in my life, but I think I should have jumped, spread my wings a little sooner.
I've never heard you say that. But yeah, thanks for sharing that, man.
Sure.
Deborah, you're up. Elliot, you're on deck.
Hi, Greg. Thank you so much for being here, for your wisdom. And we're neighbors, and I say that selfishly because I'm hoping we can have a side conversation about your French professor. I have a very interesting, I think we'll have a very interesting conversation on her and that whole approach. But what I wanted to ask you today, one is for you personally, and then one is a little bit more in response to some of the things I read in the book. I haven't finished it, but I'm more than halfway through and I'm loving it so far. You, just from all the stories you shared, you're like such a really humble person. And you get in there and you do what needs to be done. And so I know there was so much wisdom when you were talking about ego and how like egos get in the way, or sometimes you need to soften and pacify people's egos to be able to get the job done. And
Yeah.
I'm just curious, you talked about ego more as an individual thing, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts about collective ego, like
Mm.
a group's ego.
Oh, well, help me a little bit in context when you say a group's ego, because I'm thinking of a bunch of guys that go to a bar. Nobody tells the truth. Everybody's lying to each other about their success, the size of the elephant that they shot. They used a pea shooter instead of a rifle. Bragging, braggadosimo, right? It's just trying to one up conversations. And I suppose that's fine over a few beers. It's kind of ridiculous. Um, there were in the metro area of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, where I grew up, probably 15 very successful owners of community banks. And they formed a group called the Bank Owners Club. They would lie to each other like absolute crazy. They would get together every couple, 3 or 4 months. And each one of them had somebody like me that was working on the execution of all of these business strategies in their banking organizations, insurance, real estate, and other investments. So I formed my own little boys club so that we could figure out what in the hell were these guys talking about, because they would come back after a weekend at the Montecito Hotel and Resort, and we'd see the invoice come in for like $12,000 for 2 days. And then they'd be hollering at us about how come our insurance was so much, or how come we paid so much for this building, or why didn't we go to CNA or Chubb Insurance or Marsh? And I'd call my brothers and sisters up and say, did you really insure that building for $90,000? It's impossible. It must have cost much more than that. Yeah, it cost $242,000. I would get the exact number. So then I would have to carry that back and say, look, it really wasn't that way. We called it being in the duck blind. That's what we called it. Guys that shoot birds, they're in the duck blind. They're sitting there all day long waiting for the ducks. What do? They lie to each other. So yeah, that's my group story, Deborah. I don't know if it hits home, but
No, that was perfect. That was perfect because I had a sense that you would probably have some really cool stories about that. And
yeah.
then finally, the last thing I just was curious was what kinds of conversations are you do you naturally find yourself drawn to right now? Like what either to listen to or to engage in?
Well, um, I'll answer it this way. I think I'm a much better listener, Deborah, than I am a talker. And I always find more to learn from when I'm listening than when I'm talking, because when I'm talking, I already know what I'm talking about. But if I'm listening, I know I'm going to learn more. So I try to tend to be more of a listener. And right now, I'm trying to listen very, very carefully to my clients, in particular, one client who has discovered that his asset is worth way more than he thought his asset was worth. And he didn't know it. And I happen to have some relevant experience in his industry that he wasn't aware of. And I brought that information to him. And as a result of that, we're now dealing with a private sovereign fund in Dubai about bringing a great deal of money into the US for a particular transaction. And it's only because I was a listener and listening very carefully to what my client was saying. And he had just kind of vectored off to the left or the right. He wasn't really focused on what the real opportunity was. And I think now we've identified it. And yeah, I try and add value, but you have to be a good listener first.
Can I comment
Awesome.
on that? I remember being a kid watching you, and the thing that I did do right is I was with Greg every moment it was available to me. Wherever it is he'd go in the boardroom or the conference calls or the whatever. And a lot of times it came disguised at work. I remember Greg would call me and be like, hey, throw on a pair of tennis shoes. We're helping John Redding empty his mini storage. And then we'd go down there and we'd be emptying boxes. But then the whole time we're talking or we're hearing things. And Greg was an alchemist. He would, there'd be a conversation with somebody somewhere about, oh, this housing development project fell through and now they've got these, crazy high security guard bills because they have to guard the copper. And that's one conversation of 1,000 he'd have that week. But then later, a conversation would come up about, some financial arbitrage game they're playing with precious metals. And Greg would be like, oh, well, I know a guy who's got, and all of a sudden I'd watch him connect these dots that in hindsight felt so obvious. But there was a bunch of people around and nobody else saw these lines. And he'd be like, man, if I take that and add that and put this person here, money comes out. And it was such a really powerful lesson, Greg. I watched you do it over and over and over and over again. Elliot, you're up. Randy, you're on deck.
Elliot, don't give me a tough question.
I'm trying to be very kind, Greg, and so I thought I would actually I wanted to say I really appreciate you spending the time today. I know how many things you've got on your plate at the moment, and I sincerely do respect both how you work and all of the many deals I'm aware of. I'm sure many that I'm not of what you've done
Well, thanks. And
in your career.
I know you're a busy guy too, Elliot. I happen to know Elliot Dean, and it's a pleasure to see you, Elliot. So thank you for making
Well,
some time today.
well, thank you again for your time here, Greg, and speaking to everyone on the call and everyone watching live. And my question to you is actually mostly on everyone's watching behalf as well. You've closed some remarkable deals in your career. Some, that you've told me about, I would say are relatively unlikely, potentially even. My question to you is, when talking to people about closing, either if they're raising equity or if they're trying to do a sale of a business or working in M&A, just closing the deal, would you say, thinking back, there is an 80-20 to that closing?
Hmm.
What are the most important things in your mind to closing those deals? Thank you.
Boy, thank you, Elliot. That's a really good question because whether I was on the buy side or the sell side for a high net worth family I worked for and ran businesses for, or for a client, as I'm an investment banker today, and sometimes on the sell side or the buy side, is to know as much as I possibly can about the party on the other side. A lot of investment bankers really don't know too much at all about the party on the other side because they threw a whole bunch of spaghetti against the wall. They sent out 1,000 emails in a blast, and they're just playing the odds.
Mm.
And there's all kinds of investment bankers. If you hire one, great. But ask them first if they're willing to do the work up front to know who the hell they're dealing with, so that when your confidential information goes across the computer to somebody else, the odds are that they're going to have an interest. I would much rather do the work ahead of the engagement and try and identify 15 or 20 most likely candidates for a deal than to take the engagement, pick up a retainer check, turn it over to AI, and send out 1,000 emails.
Mm.
My brain would blow up. And I know the result. I would have 1,000 emails completely ignored because that's what all these lists are about. And you can get them on PitchBook. I love PitchBook. There's a lot of resources. If you ever think you're going to sell your own company and do it with a list of potential buyers, I mean, just don't waste your time. It isn't worth it. But Elliot, I think knowing the party on the other side is essential. Secondly, I would say um, trust but verify. Trust but verify. Um, I was on the sell side of a publicly traded company that I was the chairman of the board of in California. And it was a very, very difficult company to manage and own. It was highly regulated by the government. And it came time to sell the company. And I hired one of the most prestigious law firms in San Francisco and a guy in that law firm who had expertise in this particular industry. And um, I had one absolute solid buyer for this deal, but I could not really pull two or three other really solid buyers for this deal. And I'm telling you this, Elliot, from my heart. So I'm going to share something with you. So we created a due diligence room, and this is before data rooms and electronic due diligence. So you guys have to, you have to roll with me here a little bit because I was dealing with fax machines and, you know, things that you guys don't even know what a fax machine is. In any event, we set up a physical room at the end of a strip mall shopping center, and brought all the records of the company to this empty 2,000 square foot facility. I've got tables from the church, folding chairs from the church or the community room or the whatever. And we brought boxes of all this stuff in. And we told my absolute buyer, who I was so confident in, you can have the second week of due diligence because the first week and the third week are both spoken for. Oh, I'm in a bid. Yeah, you're in a bid. And you signed the NDAs, they've signed the NDAs, and you get the second week of June. So we brought all the records over ahead of the first week of June. We put rental cars out front. We had people coming and going. And me and a couple of buddies went into the files and we disorganized the papers and we put coffee stains on the papers and some of the papers were missing. So we made it look like real files, human stuff. It was been going through the first week of people in due diligence. He came in and said, gee, whoever was in here made a mess. Your records are a mess. I said, yeah, they're a bunch of slobs, these guys. And I'll help you get through these records. So he had the second week of due diligence. And the third week, we kept some rental cars going back and forth and people. And he decided he had to have this deal. He was going to outbid everybody. And we put together a great price. And he was going to take all these shares off market because it was a publicly traded company. And we got into the definitive agreements, and this very fancy law firm in San Francisco said, this is great. We're all set to go. And the president of this company, who reported to me, I was the chairman, never told me that he did not want to sell the company. He never told me. It's a publicly traded company. It's not up to him to decide. The shareholders had decided, the board of directors had decided, there was press releases, there was information all over this community. He didn't tell me this. So we have our meeting at the buyer's law firm, also in San Francisco. He walks in, his CFO walks in, his COO walks in, and his lawyer is hosting because we're at his lawyer's law firm. I show up with the president of our company and our lawyer, very prestigious law firm. We walk in. The buyer is a very short individual. Neither here nor there. I'm kind of agnostic as to people with heights. I'm 5'10", which is neither here nor there. But this guy's about 5'2", and his name is David, and he's extremely wealthy, and he's going to pay a premium to get hold of this entity. He comes in, puts his briefcase, people had briefcases those days, on the desk. Our lawyer says to David, David, nice to see you again. I hope you're not going to pull all the shit that you pulled last time we went through a deal. Guys, the guy charges like, at that time, $800 an hour, which today is like $2,500 an hour. I could not believe he said this. David, by now, has his briefcase open. He takes a can of open Coca-Cola, throws it into his briefcase, takes the papers, throws them into his briefcase, closes up the briefcase, and says, we're done. I had gone through hell and back to put this deal together and hold it together. And nobody stopped him. His CFO should have said, oh, David, this will be fine. Let's just recess for a few minutes. I was so stunned. I said, David, let's just take a break and let me talk to our lawyer a little bit about the comment that he just made. David went to the elevator. He was gone. I got down to the street. His limo was pulling away. That was it. Gone. You can never know everything. You can never know everything. It's a risk you don't even know. The people that you're working with, how they feel, what are they thinking? I later found out the president didn't want to sell and had communicated that to our lawyer. See what you can do to screw this thing up. But the best revenge is always to get somebody else's money back. So 3 years later, the guy bought the bank and he paid even more 3 years later for it. It was the highest traded multiple bank since the Depression. It sold for 5.2 times book value.
That was great. Randy, you're up. Neil, you're on deck.
All right,
Thanks, Greg.
thank you, Cosum. Thank you, Greg, for putting this on. What principle or like strongly held belief do you have that most people would disagree with?
That's a good one.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, Randy, is maybe there's a lot of things that I practice or do that people might disagree with. I think I kind of look at the results because I kind of know what the results are for pretty much everything I've done. So I think, justified or not, I think they kind of speak for themselves. I think, Randy, the thing that a lot of people would disagree with is my patience or my tolerance to get all the answers. I think most people would have given up and said, good enough, we know enough, let's close. Good enough, we know enough, let's move forward. Or good enough, we know enough, let's not do this deal, it's too risky. Or it's not worth doing, or it's too difficult to do. Or it isn't worth doing. Or they're going to leave the table, let's just fold up and move on. I would say that most people might feel that way about me. I'm telling you this, I guess I'm also speaking from the heart. Because I tell people that work with me, and I tell my clients, we don't leave the table. Once we get engaged with something, we will stay at the table and we will be the last people at the table. We will be the last people in the room. And we will find out if we have invested our time properly or not. Now, obviously, if it's obvious that this deal isn't going to happen, we can fold up. But the spirit is to take what we've invested and take what we've learned and try and capitalize on it and leverage it and see if we can accomplish not only what we set out to do, but if we can accomplish even more. Yeah.
Thanks.
So it's the bane of my existence is I spent 2 years in public accounting, and I absolutely hated it. But I learned more in 2 years about finances than I could have ever learned before that time. And of course, actually working with finances and working with piles of money of high net worth people, that only compounded many, many, many times over. But I take it very seriously when we're investing somebody else's money to know everything.
Greg says he's a recovering CPA, but I don't think he ever actually recovered.
Yeah,
Neil, you're
truth.
up. Stacy, you're on deck.
Yeah, nobody actually recovers from accounting. But yeah, so speaking of not knowing everything, I have a crystal ball question for you. Um, so, we talk a lot about AI here on the Daily Sigh and how it's affecting businesses and creation of businesses and other lines of business being run into the ground. Um, so in the M&A space, do you see this AI wave as, you know, let's say it delivers on the promise of increasing productivity fundamentally. Is that going to compress on margins, per operator, or is the people who implement this kind of stuff going to be able to capture that value add?
Uh, I think the answer is probably both. Um, I think AI, at least in my business, enables us to do a tremendous amount of research in a short period of time. So the time we spend in due diligence and exploration about an industry and the people in the industry and who's able to perform in the industry using AI compresses the amount of time and it enables us to move faster. But Neil, it also enables everybody else to move faster. So it only gives me a first mover advantage if I'm ready to be the first mover. And if I've got 5 other things I have to deal with, I may not be able to get to it that fast, wherein somebody else is moving at the same lightning speed using AI, and they have the time to make it their priority and they can move ahead of me. So I think it's helpful, but we also have to be mindful that we're not the only ones using it. And it used to be that you could make a great deal of money in an inefficient market. And I could give you dozens of examples of what I mean by that. In inefficiencies lies opportunities. But if people are using AI around the world and in our various industries, then there are fewer inefficiencies. Take, for example, all the pharmaceutical companies today that are using AI, they're making discoveries in 3 months that would have taken 10 years or never. And they're competing with each other, trying to bring new drugs to market. So they're able to reduce their costs, their time to market, improve their profit margins, but so is everybody else. So everybody adjusts to the new opportunities and the new speed with regards to bringing opportunities to market and also how they use those tools. I guess in any event, if people aren't using AI, they're going to fall way, 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 way behind and be left behind. Not in every business, not in every industry. I mean, there's still businesses that are highly reliant on interactions and relationships between people. There's no question about that, and I don't see AI changing that. But it is a factor for most businesses for sure, and certainly for big businesses.
Greg, do you have time for two more?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Lovely. Stacy, you're up. Dylan, you're on deck. Dylan will close us out.
Hi, and thank you so much for being here. I haven't had the pleasure of reading your book yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
I am working on a system that takes principles used in family offices like values, structure, and generational thinking to make it accessible to everyday individuals and families so they can pass on wealth and not just assets. So I'd really and I'd like your thoughts on that, by the way, but I'd really like your perspective on what actually matters in that world. So let me just ask you this question. In your experience, what do family offices actually preserve beyond money?
Preserve, what was that? Preserve what? They preserve what?
Beyond money. In
Oh,
other words,
beyond money.
beyond money, what is it that they could or should, and often do in those families, pass
Well,
down?
I've seen the failure of wealthy family offices in transferring passion, accountability, responsibility, um, caring for others. I've seen this with the patriarch who takes the risk, builds the wealth, takes the leverage, manages the debt, creates the outcome, and then for what? His kids get an estate, they can start drawing down at age 25 in increments. There's medical provisions, educational provisions for them and for their grandchildren. But what they've passed down is a feeling of entitlement to the children, and they got nothing out of it except a bank account. So one turns to drugs, nearly kills himself 10 times, 12 times, 15 times. Uh, you know, it's abysmal. It's unfortunate, but um, this happens when there's an incredible amount of wealth that they forget the social responsibility in dealing with how to deal with it. And I don't fault the kids because they didn't get the schooling and the education that they could have got from the family. Um, Thankfully, these aren't families that I work for, but they're families that I know about because of my relationship with other families and other people that I've worked with. You'll read about this in magazines like Forbes and Business. I think the most notorious I read was the Kraft family years ago, where they all ended up just suing each other. And half of them were lawyers anyways. So I don't know, Stacy. I think that's a big part of the responsibility of a patriarch who's 100% invested in his business to be sure that he or she spend that investment down into their family with uh, a scope of responsibility and duty for what they can do and should do with these financial resources.
Those are great questions,
Thank
Stacy.
you.
Thank you for that. Dylan.
For a small business owner who is starting to get interest from investors but has never made a deal like that before, how would you suggest that person start learning about making deals for equity and also protecting themselves in those deals?
Um, uh, there's a lot you can do, but you're not going to get it all from a textbook, and you're not going to get it all online. And there are certainly thousands of examples of people that were taken advantage of because they didn't have a good lawyer or a good accountant or a good mentor who had had those kinds of experiences. And if you're thinking about bringing capital into your business, you have to think about what is the business going to look like after you have that capital and your duty and responsibility to manage that capital and what's going to be the outcome. That necessarily means you're going to have a financial forecast and what is the investor's expected return. And that probably means you need an accountant to help you with that, depending on your level of financial aptitude. And I've seen plenty of business founders with almost no financial aptitude. And well, you can put your hand down, Qasim. You're a special case. And maybe I could talk about that for a moment, but I think you need to have somebody with a little more experience to help you with accounting and financial reporting so that you're making appropriate disclosures before you take any money. You don't need to have a license with the SEC to be able to take somebody's money. You can do it yourself. But you might want to look at the types and kinds of offerings that businesses typically put out there to raise money, like a private placement memorandum, subscription agreements, disclosure documents. And for you, you probably want to think about what is the value of your business today, and that's called the pre-money valuation. How much money are you looking for, and what is the post-money valuation? And how are these numbers arrived at? How is your industry valued? Is it valued as a multiple of revenue? Is it valued as a multiple of EBITDA, or earnings before interest and taxes? Is it a multiple of some other factor? So many different ways to value a business. But you better get a good grip on what you think the value of your business is today, because you're going to get diluted by the equity that you bring in, whether it's equity or a convertible note. And there's a lot of ways to negotiate these things. And that's where your attorney will come into play. And I don't mean a real estate attorney. I don't mean a litigation or defense attorney. I mean an M&A attorney. And they are way different than the other kinds of attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
So I think an attorney that can give you advice and counsel has worked on mergers and acquisitions, and also an accounting firm that can help you with trying to get a level set baseline on what is your business all about and what is a reasonable value for your business. My advice to anybody that's thinking about forming a business, get a grip on your financials, right? And for Cosm, it's never too late.
Never too late. Or just make sure that somebody who knows finances happens to be your best friend, because that can help too.
Yeah.
Wayne?
Yeah, thank you, Greg, for your time. You've been very generous with it. I can't wait to read your book as well.
Thank you.
So you, as a switch of topics, but you mentioned early in the call that you noted that the Federal Reserve is finally warming up to tokenization, which is I've been in the crypto space and decentralized finance for many years, almost a decade now. And especially, I think Kasim even said his news that Kraken just received a FedMaster account. So as far as an investor, now that we have a clearer regulatory framework around tokenization and we see that solidifying, what do you see? I'm curious to see, what do you see as specific traditional assets that you think will explode in value or have some of the biggest opportunities in value as we move forward with tokenization?
Wayne, that's a good question, and I wish I could answer it, but I don't have myself schooled up well enough to really know the answer. And I don't know if anybody really has the answer, because it's a whole new industry. It's a whole new frontier. In fact, I think it's a whole new way of evaluating risk. But there's tremendous interest in it. My broker dealer, I mentioned earlier, does about 1.4 billion a year in pre-IPO equities. One of those IPO expected to be IPO equities is Kraken. And we met 3 weeks ago some folks in New York that are building a fund to own pre-IPO shares, in this case, of Kraken. And I've been reading about Kraken, and I've been reading about what the Fed thinks about Kraken, and they finally had some breakthrough on this, which was announced earlier today, and it's kind of been expected, which has caused the delay in the IPO. They pushed the IPO out. Why? Because they want to get the full last dollar value that they possibly can for their company. And what better value could they append to the value of their company than to have a relationship with the Fed, and a positive relationship, not a negative relationship. And if we do have a change in the Fed chairman, which is expected, I don't think that'll change the relationship with the Fed, because I think the current administration is very favorable to tokenization and regulating these new currencies. So we developed a client relationship with these folks in New York that have put together a fund. They found a ROFR that had $300 million of Kraken at a particular price. A ROFR is a right of first refusal, ROFR, right of first refusal entity that happened to own 300 million shares of Kraken at an earlier price, today's price, $300 million. But as a right of first refusal, they also have a right to participate in about 10% of the IPO. So our client has hooked the 300 million. They asked us to find them a buyer for the 300 million. And then they said, put an overage of 100 to 150 million on top of that. So when the IPO comes, they can take the ROFR's interest, which the ROFR has offered to sell as a package. So the ROFR can sell their 300 million plus what they're going to get out of the IPO, which is expected to be about $1 billion. So 10% of that being 100 million. And we barely got this conversation underway, and the 300 million came. Now, did it come from within the US? No. It came from the Middle East. So it's a global play for absolute certainty. And who knows what other people know about opportunities with these currencies. Since I can't know everything, and since I'm kind of a quant, we've already talked about how I kind of get stuck with really needing to know everything before I get engaged. I haven't really got myself engaged in tokenization, but there's a ton of people that are out there figuring this out, just like there are a ton of people figuring out power and water and land and how to build data centers. And that's right here in our backyard. And a lot of that power is, going to be related to tokenization. So we're going to see these industries come together. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you, Wayne, but that's an evolving industry, and I can't say that I really have an opinion really too much right now.
No, it was very valuable just to hear you talk through and think through it. So I appreciate that.
Sure.
Greg, this was amazing. I want to turn the tables on you a little. On this call are some of the smartest people I know, to be frank. And we've got a lot of agency and a lot of passion. And I think there's a lot that we could do. If you needed something, I'd be curious what that might be. Is there something we can do to help you, serve you, help somebody, or something that you care deeply about? Like, what does Greg Smith need right now?
I'm really blessed. I don't know that I can speak to anything specifically. Maybe if y'all could come up here and help me get my dock and boathouse put together when the wind dies down, so I could get my boat in the water.
Tell them the name of your boat, the new one.
It's bad luck to change the name of your boat, so I bought a boat called MT Pockets, but it's M.T. Pockets. And then the logo is the guy with the top hat from the Monopoly game.
With empty pockets.
With empty pockets.
Wow.
Yeah, with empty pockets. So it's Empty Pocket. That's my boat, Empty Pockets.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
We're on Lake Minnetonka in Minneapolis, by the way. That's where I am.
Yeah, rolling up to Lord Fletcher's and living the dream. Thank you for being here, man. This meant a lot. I don't know if you've been watching the chat, but everybody I think is super grateful that you took the time out with us. Would love to have you back someday if you're willing.
Yeah,
maybe when you drop that second book.
Yep.
And yeah, love you, brother. Thanks for being my friend.
Happy to do it. If anyone's got, like a follow-up or something, let Kazim know, and maybe we can reach back to you and fill you in on one thing or another, and I'd be pleased to come back. So thank you for that. And thank you all.
Love to have you back. If you're watching this live and you want to join the Zoom, you can always do so by going to dailysigh.ai. I noticed we actually had some questions coming in through the social channels. Forgive me for not getting to those questions. I just wanted to honor the people that show up live, and we ran out of time because I got to go get the two best little boys in the world from school. If you're here on the Zoom room, we have a private WhatsApp community that's available to you. It's absolutely free to join. I just dropped the link in the chat. If you want all of these calls summarized and sent to your inbox, you can go to dailysigh.ai, get a daily and or a weekly summary, and you can always join my free forever community, which has the links to Zoom in the calendar and a really awesome forum where everybody here contributes just whatever it is that happens to be going on. We go live every single day at 6 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes it's open forum conversation. Sometimes we have a phenomenal guest like Greg, and we're still learning what we're doing. So would love to hear any feedback that you have, anything that we can be doing better. In the interim, thank you so much. Love you all. See you tomorrow, 6 p.m. High fives.